Give it a second.
What is up? Welcome to the very first edition of Altitude Adjustment Pop-Up Office, which is where I will do shows on the road as I'm working on the Denver Broncos, or rather in between working on the Broncos. So I'm coming to you live from Chicago. Zach is at an undisclosed location on a romantic getaway, so we will not be discussing where he is at. Instead, what we will be talking about is, of course, our Denver Broncos. I know it has been really tough sledding, Zach. Bronco fans are starting to turn on each other. We have one half, I think, of the population that wants them to turn things around and get better, and the other half of the population that wants to tank for Caleb Williams. Now, we'll get into that. We just saw Caleb Williams light up the CU offense, something that you and I on our Let's Talk Buffs podcast had pretty much predicted. We said it would be a shootout, and really quick shout out to that pod, Zach, because I don't think that we've been wrong about a single thing yet.
Classic me being muted. I don't think we have. We're hitting 1,000 right now. We're being so perfect. What a game. And it's great. These were the two hardest games the Buffs have all season. Like, I think Utah's going to be very tough as well, but I don't think it'll be as tough as these two. You got Arizona State and Stanford coming up. The schedule gets a little lighter. I think all the Pac-12 teams are tough, but I'm excited to see where things go, but we'll save that all for Tuesday.
Yeah. So obviously we're talking about Caleb Williams. Now, I'm going to refer to a tweet that I had sent out several days ago, Zach, and it got picked up by, some publication that was really desperately trying to get clicks. And that's fine. Like, I appreciate it. Just, send me a thank you every once in a while. Like, you don't need to pay me. Send me a card. Send me an edible arrangements. Like, I'm giving you all of this beautiful content for free. Just give me a shout out or something. That's all I ask, but we'll move on from that. But in that tweet, Zach, and it kind of started as tongue in cheek. And as I'm writing this thread, and then as I've had, a few days to think about it and to see people respond, I really don't think that it's that off base. So let me clue everybody in if you don't know what I'm talking about. I had basically put together a conspiracy theory thread that Sean Payton purposefully hired Vance Joseph because he knew that Vance Joseph would run this defense into the ground. Now, it looked like a good hire because it's like, oh, well, Vance Joseph had been a head coach and he's a noteworthy person. But if you look at his track record, Zach, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think that he's ever been in charge of a top 20 defense. So what does Sean Payton do? He comes in. We all think he's going to fix Russ, right? We think that that's his process. And for all intents and purposes, Zach, like, he's not the Russ of 2019, 2020, the Seattle Russ, but he sure as hell has looked a lot better. But if you're an offensive-minded head coach like Sean Payton, and your goal is to improve the offense, which very low bar set last year, but it's been greatly improved from, honestly, ever since the Super Bowl year. And then on the other side, it's like we haven't had to worry about the defense in a really, really, really long time. Ever since the Super Bowl, it's been phenomenal defense, below average to bad offense. And now all of a sudden it's different. So in my tweet, I mentioned how this was a calculated tank, hiring a guy like Vance Joseph, who could ruin a defense that, for the most part, is the same as last year. I know they traded Bradley Chubb, and that's a big loss. And, I know they didn't have Ronald Darby, even though, they didn't really have him at all last year. But this is mostly like this. They did not lose so many pieces to justify them being this bad. So, Zach, my whole premise was that they were, in a roundabout way, tanking, but trying to make sure that people didn't know. And also for a way for Sean Payton to absolve himself from blame. Am I way off base here, or are we on to something?
I think you're on to something, but I don't think you're quite on it. I don't think Vance Joseph was intentionally hired to tank the season or anything. I do think, and Joey was mentioning this all off season long, he is a very convenient fall guy. You can just throw Vance Joseph right under the bus for I think it was clear to see this defense was going to regress some. Like you said, Vance Joseph, not a great defensive coordinator. I think the last two defensive coordinators, not Ed Donatel, but Vic Fangio was running the defense. Let's be real. Last two defensive overseers, CEOs the Broncos have had, I think, are elite in the NFL. And Vance Joseph is not that. So we knew some level of regression was coming. I didn't think we expected it to be this bad. I do think one thing that gives your argument credence, though, is the fact that option B was Rex Ryan, hot take artist off an ESPN desk, which is not
Are we
appealing.
to believe that he would actually be doing a better job, or is he just putting his foot in his mouth, which I'm sure he would love?
I think he thinks he'd be doing a better job. That is so hard for me to believe. Like he's
right.
The last time Rex Ryan had a good defense was the same season Adam Gase had a good offense. Okay. Does the idea of Adam Gase running the offense excite you? No, it shouldn't, because we've seen a lot since then. That was disappointing, and the NFL has left him behind. Same with Rex Ryan. Let it go.
And we're now. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. ESPN's paid him $4 million a year. To leave that, you have to make him one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the league. He should be the lowest paid. It's a terrible deal. The Broncos are wise to avoid that grenade. It's
interesting that you bring up Adam Gase, because I kind of come to the conclusion that Adam Gase is basically Nathaniel Hackett, and Nathaniel Hackett is Adam Gase. You want to talk about guys that rode the coattails of a Hall of Fame quarterback, and a guy that like kept getting them jobs, and guys who, when they got these subsequent jobs, did nothing but fail and run teams into the ground. I mean, Adam Gase got 2 head coaching jobs because Peyton Manning is a really, really good quarterback. But we'll see more of that next week when the Jets come to town.
We will. That Hackett Peyton thing, I do think there's a very good chance the Broncos win both these games. I do think the tank for Caleb is probably pretty unlikely, but I don't know. Raiders and Washington, I don't think are good teams, and they lost those 2 at home. So I do think it's kind of on the table. We'll see.
Zach, I think tomorrow's game is going to tell us maybe everything we need to know about this area. Now, obviously, I want to preface this by saying, like, this was meant to be tongue in cheek. You know, I called it a conspiracy theory for a reason, because, you know, for the most part, conspiracy theories aren't true. Like, they're fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, it was fun for me in high school to think that Tupac was still alive. And part of me still does, like, even though they've allegedly apprehended his killer. But you got to take it at face value. You got to take it for what it is, right? Now, if they go out and lose to like a bad Bears team that is like even more depleted than they have been, then there might be something cooking, because this is 100% a game that they should not lose and cannot lose. So on the other side of this coin, Zach, you know, if we're not doing this under the table tank, how does this team get back into it? Like, if we can assume that they win the next 2 games, that they can push it to 2-3, they've got a really difficult stretch. They've got Chiefs in Kansas City on a Thursday night. And then the Packers the following week. They have a benefit of, like, you know, a little mini bye week coming off the Thursday night game. And then, of course, the Chiefs the following week before their bye. So let's say that they go into that 3-game stretch 2-3. Realistically, where do you put their record going into the bye week? Like, if they can get some momentum in these next 2 games, can they start to reel off some wins? Is it a situation where they need a get-right game and they just need to feel things clicking? Or are we too far gone right now?
I mean, I think it's a mix of both. You know, I don't think it's totally far gone. Like, you look at the offense, I do think this is a good offense. The defense is really bad, but I don't think they should be, to your point, historically bad. I do think the talent is better than that. I think there's room for a little bit of positive regression from both sides. Because again, Russell Wilson is brand new with Sean Payton. He's been unbelievable playing on the team's rehearsed script. Once you get later in the halves is where his play really dives. Hopefully, you know, some familiarity builds between quarterback and play caller. We see that only continue to build. So I do think things should get better as the season goes on. I also don't think Sean Payton is the type to pack it in and accept the tank.
Even for Caleb Williams, even though he said last year in November of 2022 with Colin Cowherd that the NFL is going to have to start moving to a lottery, because Caleb Williams is that kind of generational talent that would justify tanking. That's right. There are more layers to this. This is not just some willy-nilly thing.
And that's the thing that has to be mentioned here. I'm annoyed with some of the Broncos fans on Twitter. I'm going to use this to vent really quick, because they are not understanding what a tank is. Like, it's like, oh, all these media people want the Broncos to be bad. No. All of us are financially motivated for the Broncos to be good. 1. Two, we want them to be good. Getting a Patrick Mahomes type quarterback, look what that does for a franchise. Look what Josh Allen did to the Bills. Look what Joe Burrow did to the Bengals. Look at what Trevor Lawrence is doing to the Jaguars. It changes everything. It allows you to make a ton of other mistakes. That is not the case when you have a franchise quarterback making $60 million. Like, you need them to be elite just to like keep treading water. It frustrates me to no end. But anyways, yeah, I think the Broncos going into the bye, it's going to be tough just because they get those 2 easy games. I feel good about 2 and 3, but then you get 2 games against the Chiefs and a game against the Packers, which are, I mean, they're not the Rodgers Packers, but this is still a very good team. Matt LaFleur has the best winning percentage of any NFL coach in NFL history. This is not an easy out. I think even if the Broncos get these 2 easy wins, there's a very good chance we're looking at 2 and 6 at the bye. If they don't get these 2 easy wins, man, Caleb Williams is really, really, really on the table for this team.
Like I said, yeah, these next 2 games will really tell a lot about where the team is at, where they are headed. And honestly, on a personal note, and I'll get your opinion on this, I had seen rumors that if the team is continuing on this trajectory, that Justin Simmons would be a trade candidate. Now, obviously, for personal reasons, that is the last thing that I want to see happen. That is the last guy that I want to see go. But from a standpoint of the team, like, to me, that's mailing it in. And I get you want to add draft picks, you want to do this, you want to do that, but you have to look at the deeper ramifications of trading a guy like that. I mean, you flash back to when they made the decision to trade Demaryius Thomas. Yeah, they were able to add draft picks. It rubbed the team the wrong way, and it really did them no good in the long run, because here we are in 2023. I believe that trade was made in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. 2017, 2018. And it, you release a guy, especially a captain, like he had been named a captain that year. It was the same with Von Miller, even though that was a little bit of a different situation because you got a good haul for Von Miller. And even though he was a captain, Von wasn't necessarily like the locker room leader that Justin Simmons was, but it still rubbed guys the wrong way. Like, a lot of guys were very upset behind closed doors about the Von Miller trade. If you were to turn around and trade at Justin Simmons, that is going to be a really bad black eye on your franchise. And not only that, Zach, it's like, what do you do with the safety position? I mean, I get that you're going to get PJ Locke back, and that's going to be a huge boost to that secondary, but Kareem Jackson probably isn't coming back next year. Delarian Turner-Yell looked like he was still in college last week. I mean, he struggled mightily. Granted, he had massive shoes to fill, but you trade your, second best defensive player and probably your second best player on the entire team. Where do you go from there? Like, to me, if you're wanting to rebuild this, if you're Sean Payton, you're wanting to get back to being competitive as soon as possible, even if it's not this year, if it's next year, to me, it's a terrible move. But I'm biased, so go ahead and interject real quick.
No, I don't know. It's hard for me to have much optimism with this team. Like, I don't know. I just think the roster has so many problems ultimately. Like, I think what Sean Payton is doing right now with the offense is an unbelievable coaching job. They're relying heavily on practice squad receivers. The offensive line, I do think, is a big step forward, and credit there. But man, they do not have great pass catching talent, and they're still performing like a top offense. But then you look at the defense, and it's just the defensive line they're relying on. I mean, like Jonathan Harris has been a longtime practice squatter, staying in Denver, not getting poached anywhere for a reason. I'm glad he's finally getting his opportunity, but he's played like the 20th most snaps of any defensive lineman in the league this year. He's playing way more than Jalen Carter. Like, the Broncos are in a very bad spot there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, man. If you're in a bad spot, you want to be adding talent. You don't want to be getting rid of talent. And especially like with where the defense is at, I think that would be the dagger in the hearts of this season. And again, it would rub a lot of guys the wrong way. And you want to talk about guys wanting to play with the team or guys wanting to play for a certain franchise. If you start getting that moniker of being the team that trades your star players, Demaryius Thomas, Von Miller, now if Justin Simmons were to follow suit, like I said, massive black eye on the franchise, and people can disagree with me all they want, but I talk to the players. I can look behind the scenes, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, fact, that if that were to happen, there like all hell would break loose, and Sean Payton would absolutely be at risk of losing the locker room if he's the one that makes that call.
I think that's fair. I think my counter would be, I think you need a really heavy overhaul of this locker room. I mean, I think it's fair to say they gave up pretty quick, and not everyone, but a lot of pieces of this team gave up pretty quick in that loss to the Dolphins. That's part of how a historic blowout happens. And we're 5 games removed from them getting 50 dropped on them. Like, I do think there's a bit of a losing mentality somewhat in this locker room. Like, I don't blame Garrett Bowles for it. It's the situation he's been drafted into, but Garrett Bowles just like, I'm tired of losing. All I've done is lose. Like, there's a lot of people in the Broncos locker room where all they've done in the NFL is lose. And I think that I think is the argument for a fresh start. And while I agree it can be a black mark on the franchise, I think we also saw how someone like George Paton came in, paid players deserving of paychecks, and quickly overhauled a culture that John Elway had built that the players really despised. And you talk with the players. I don't talk with the players as much as you, but from what little I do know, money talks in the NFL. Money is the ultimate decision maker. The Broncos ownership has more power than any other ownership in the league to give players guaranteed money, to give them money up front. And that can very quickly remake any issues you stir up by doing a teardown. I don't think any of those problems have to be permanent, especially in the NFL, where we see roster churn overturning entire teams every 3-4 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought up Garrett Bowles, because I thought it was ironic that he's sitting there and talking about how much the team has sucked and how they've sucked since he's been there. And I get it, you're down and you're in a bad situation, but considering the fact that he was asked to restructure and free up some cap space in the offseason and refused, would lead me to believe that, you know, maybe you didn't play your part in making sure that this is a better team. But what do I know?
Yeah, and I just that is always interesting to me, because I think a lot of people think restructuring means taking money away from a player, and it doesn't. It's giving them the money right now guaranteed and kicking off. You're giving them cash right now. As far as the NFL judges cap hit, you're pushing the cap hit down the line. That has nothing to do with the money. You are giving them a big bucket of money right now for cap problems later in the future. I don't.
But sometimes guys just can't set their egos aside and see the big picture. So it is what it is. One last thing, Zach, before we get out of here. If the Broncos were to turn it around, if they were to start playing like the team that we all hope that they would be coming into this season, if they were to rebound from an 0-3 start, make a push for one of those wild card spots, what needs to happen? Who needs to step up? What is the biggest thing that has to change? You're in that locker room and you're trying to get things turned around. What do you do? Go.
Man, I think you hope Baron Browning comes back healthy. Like, I really think the biggest problem is, and like maybe Riley Moss gets involved, you need to find some new faces to make plays. Drew Sanders, maybe not all the way there as a inside linebacker, but he's really good at rushing the passer. And this team right now is 32nd in the league in pass rush win rate. The secondary outside of Patrick Surtain can't hold up right now. As the secondary gets a little healthier, as maybe you get Baron Browning back, maybe as Randy Gregory gets a little healthier from that big knee surgery, maybe this defense can get forward, but that's where it has to come from. The offense is doing their job right now, Broncos country. I know it's easy to see, the 13 points last week and be like, same old Broncos. It's a different 13 points. Like it's funky, but the offense is there. They're having some weird bad luck and bad breaks, much like the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. That's going to pan out over time. But I think the big hope is, man, can we find pass rush somewhere? Can we find some players on the defensive front? Benito's doing a little something. Cooper's doing a little something, but it's got to be more.
So bottom line is everything needs to change because everything's terrible and we've got to do a 180. Sounds easy. I'm here for it, man. Like at the end of the day, and I said this in my very first altitude adjustment video, like I am cursed with looking at life through orange and blue glasses, right? And it wasn't always a curse. It's just felt that way over the last several years. And so no matter what, I'm going to have that deep belief somewhere down in my soul that the Broncos will be able to turn around. And guess what, Zach? It starts Sunday against the Bears.
I feel it. I feel it.
I need to see a